Yeah, what's really interesting because I've gotten a lot of exposure recently, and I'm typically an under the radar kind of guy. I like to be unknown. Like when I go to the auction, nobody knew who I was.
Welcome to Trial to Triumph, hosted by Caleb Johnson, the show about leaning into life's constant testing on your way to realizing your biggest blessings.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Caleb Johnson, host of From Trial to Triumph. On this show, we talk about trials that people have gone through, and they have come through that triumphant and are now successful. And today, I'm really excited about our guest. He's been investing for the last 20 plus years, has been through a market cycle in '08 and has come out on top of that. And he also works with family, which you don't always see. So Bruce Wuollet, welcome to the show.
Hey, Caleb, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Bruce, can you give our listeners just a quick backstory about where you started and how you got here?
Well, how far the backstory? So I got into real estate in 2001. Did tax lien foreclosures with the guy that became my mentor, and he's now passed on. But he taught me a lot about how to do research, how to dig in and find public records and find people. So that's been very, very valuable for me in finding owners of buildings and real estate. Before that, I was executive recruiter, or a headhunter, as it's called in the industry, in Minneapolis and Chicago, as I was seeking out top talent for other companies. And that taught me a lot about human relations and how to get ahead in personal development. And then as far as real estate goes, I formed Bakerson in 2002. I tell everybody I'm an SOB. I'm a son of a baker. So the name Bakerson comes out of the bakery business. I grew up in the Wuollet bakeries in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and escaped from Minnesota in 97, moved to Chicago, and then I escaped from Chicago in 99. I say escaped because it's cold and miserable up there in the winter.
So Bruce, I know you started Bakerson in '02, and I'm sure starting a new business, there's always some things that you have to, just roll with the punches. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, well, when I started, I went from tax lien foreclosures. Then I noticed that my mentor Gary was leaving a lot of money on the table on how he was buying the property. So I said, hey, how can we buy some houses? So I started buying houses on my own. Picked up 3 houses, a duplex and a triplex, and some of those through him. And then I said, then we got introduced in December of 2002. We got introduced to wholesaling. 2003, wholesaled 60-something houses, 47 to one buyer. And I would just go look at the property, tell him about it, and he would just buy it from me. And then from there through 2015, wholesaled 2,200 homes in the Phoenix Metro, all in the Phoenix Metro. And we went from buying them at the auction to short sales, the little yellow notes, distressed properties, ones that were condemned by the city. Any way we could find a lead, that dive down and find the lead, and I'd find the owner. So we had a mantra that find the owner, talk to the owner, find the owner, talk to the owner. And so that was to develop those leads, and did really well in wholesaling. But as technology got involved in wholesaling, it made it very difficult because people could go online and at an auction buy the property, get title insurance, get a loan, and they could put $2,000 down and pick up a $50,000 house. And we just couldn't compete with that, with those systems some of my competitors had, and we stayed in the old-fashioned yellow notes, knocking on doors. So we ended up saying, especially at the auction was difficult for us to compete in the auction because they were able to streamline the systems with automation. So we said, let's wholesale apartment buildings. So we started wholesaling apartment buildings, did like 24, 25 apartment buildings, and then, we could fix and sell them. So then we got into fix and sell, and we've done over 1,000 units, completely turned. But then lately, if we fast track to today, what's different and what have I learned? I found out that every time we buy, fix, and sell a property, I'm unemployed. I got to go find a new job or find a new building to buy. And so my question that I'm asking the investors is, why do you always want to put the sponsor out of work? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, anytime we sell a property, you get your money back. I'm looking for work. You've got many options, So I decided a few years ago, and if you want an insider secret on how to shrink your database, you tell your investors that you're going to buy it with no intention of selling, and you lose almost all your investors because they like the returns and the in and out, in and out, in and out. And the last 3 years have been very, very good for investors that got in and out. So last year, sold all of our properties in Tucson and Southern Arizona, and we picked up, started slow, we rebuilt. We bought one in Southern Arizona, and now we're buying in Albuquerque and Dallas. And we're buying legacy. We're creating legacy cash flow, long-term holds. Buy in any market as long as the loan will cover you over a 10 or 15 year period, so that if there's another drop, we just hold it through that. And our goal is to buy the property, get a good loan, keep it occupied, stress test it so that we can make it through a down swelling and still be in business on the other side of a market crash. So we don't want our loans due in the next 3-4 years. That'd be difficult.
You know, you said so many nuggets there, and I just want to talk about real quick. Wholesaling 2,200 properties is a huge number. That's crazy. So if we just had a minute, I want to get back to more the recession and just what you're doing now. But on the wholesaling front, what really led to that much success and that much volume? And was that also, so we have some perspective?
Oh, I'll tell you exactly.
Was that 2,200 units in 1 year?
No, in the lifetime. The biggest, we did nearly 300 a year, but we had 20 to 30 escrows a month, and so it was quite sizable. But what drove that, I'll tell you exactly what drove that, is when we were wholesaling in 2005, 6, 7, 8, it became more and more difficult because the prices were going up. You could buy a house and sell it in a month and make 10%. And we just didn't take that risk. So we kind of backed off of housing and said we sold all of our rentals, and we got into land. And we were going to do a development. This is where it got really exciting, because we became a land developer. We bought this square mile of land on seller carrybacks, seller financing, and our goal was to package that, assemble it, and then sell it to the neighboring golf course, because they had a plan to expand. Well, we showed them that we had better land for them to expand their golf course than their previous plan, and we met with the owner. He was really excited. We started developing the relationship. Greg Norman came out and created a course for what it would look like in this phase 2 of this golf course. We didn't meet him, but I was looking forward to, in my mind, I was like, oh man, I'm going to be hobnobbing with Greg Norman. We'll be on a yacht in the Caribbean and talking business. And then 2008 happened. And we ended up waiting it out 2008, working with that developer 2009, 2010, and we just kept feeding that machine. And finally I said, we can't, we're done. We have no more money. We've spent everything. We've lost it. We've spent all of our money, have this huge debt with these sellers. Called them up one by one and said, here, we're just giving you the property back. You can have it. So they got the property back, plus they got to keep their down payment and the payments that they got over time. So we didn't have any foreclosures or bankruptcy, but that was a very stressful time, and lost a lot of our own money. My partner and I had 7 digits we were sitting on, pretty young. We thought, hey, we're sitting pretty good. We've never had that kind of money. And all of a sudden that was all just wiped out through this process. So from then we went back to the roots of what are we good at? We're good at wholesaling. So then we got I just was working, 80, 90, 100 hours a week wholesaling, just researching all night, driving properties in the morning, making bids in the afternoon, closing on the next day with the auction, because the auctions were really, really hot, and so were short sales. So we were looking at probably about 20 properties a day. I had 3 drivers out there that would go out, drive, and give drive reports, and then we'd make decisions on what we're going to buy. So my brother and I, we looked at that and said, okay, which ones are we going to buy? And we'd go through the list, and I'd pick mine, he'd pick his. We'd call, share notes. All of this had to be done by 10 o'clock in the morning. So we started at 3, 4 in the morning, getting it put together. As soon as the sun was up, he was in the car, and 2 other drivers were out getting drive reports, finding out, is the property vacant, is it occupied, knock on the door if the people are there and find out if they're the owners. We didn't like to buy occupied buildings with the people that were that we had to do evictions on, so we were very particular in how we did our process. But sometimes we bought them. But anyway, so we put together these numbers, and by 10 o'clock, and then make the offers, and then I call up, hey, we got that one. Oh, we got this one. We got that one. So then my brother and my son would go out and do the clean outs, the trash outs, getting them ready to resell them, and we'd resell them right away. Within our average hold is only 52 days, so we held them for an hour, and we'd go to the title company 2 days later. Somebody else is the owner, so we turned them really, really, really fast. So that was the motivation. Because of that failure that we had, that was a huge motivation for us to dig out of that hole we made and reposition ourselves for the rising market. And looking back, we didn't, as much as we didn't do near enough. If I would have kept 1 in 10 of those properties, I could have a couple hundred rentals with no debt. That would have been pretty awesome. But at the time, it was a machine. I was kind of addicted to the flip, and that carried over to multifamily as well. When we were flipping multifamily, that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. You talked a little bit about working with family, and I really like that perspective. And let's talk about that briefly. Whenever I'm always weary of working with family and, mom, dad, brother, sister, and even friends. You don't want to rent to your best friend sometimes because, or your family, because that might become awkward around the Thanksgiving table if that doesn't go so well. How was that dynamic when just working with you guys? How did you work through struggles or disagreements?
Well, I'm going to go back a little further to when I worked with my father at the Wuollet bakeries in Minnesota, and I grew up in a family business. And he had a rule that we did not talk business around the dinner table. So whatever happened at work, and we didn't bring our home troubles to work. So if my dad and I had a disagreement at home, when we were at work, we were working together, and we didn't talk about what happened at home. And if there was unresolved issues, he would not bring it up at work. We would work together, and then we got home and say, hey, he always called me Boo. Hey, Boo, we got to talk. And we have a chit chat, but he would not carry that. He was able to compartmentalize the work from home. So he said, we do not make decisions around the dinner table, around what goes on at the bakery. What happens at the bakery stays at the bakery, what happens at home stays at home. So that was in my mind. Well, then we went through this process, and my dad managed all the employees, 100-something employees at the bakeries. He overseen all of them, and I watched what he went through, and I said, when I start a business, I'm not going to have employees. So I started my business with a guy, Jack Martin, awesome guy, just a fantastic human being, and he was running the employees, and I was managing the business and feeding the machine. And then over time, it felt like all of a sudden one day all the employees were working for me, and I was like, well, they're kind of reporting to me. There was a shift, and I don't know when it happened, but I found it was it was bittersweet. It was a little bit, it was fun but not. And then in 2016, Jack went off into the mobile home park business, and he's doing well there, and it's really awesome. We had a good split, and he's doing his thing, I'm doing mine. But with the employees, we had the same rule. You do not talk about work at home. When we're at home, in fact, sometimes you forget, and my son-in-law will say, we're at home, and he'll remind me that we don't talk work at home. So it's really been good for us to separate that. And then as far as any things at work, forgiveness goes a long way. So if there's an issue, resolve it right away, especially with somebody that you live with or spend a lot of time with, like family. I think you do it with everybody, but you don't want to go, like if we're having a heated moment at work, and then that evening there's a dinner get together at our house, I better have it resolved before I go to the dinner party, because I don't want any tension at that party. So as I'm wrapping up the day of work, I'd go over, and if whoever it was, if it was a son, a daughter, brother, brother-in-law, whoever it is, I would say, things didn't go really. Let's before we leave, let's resolve this. Let's make sure that we're on the same page. So forgiveness goes a long ways, and without that, we'd have nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great, especially it all starts with how you're raised, right? And that's so great that your father was able to teach you to compartmentalize those things from a business and separate it at home, right? So there wasn't that uncomfortable friction, and that's how you kept your relationship. That's great. We also wanted to talk about the recession, and in 2008, there aren't many investors that have survived that or even experienced that. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you had to go through?
Well, in during that time, I remember 2006, 7, the people were telling me, friends of mine were telling me that, the market's rising too fast. And we're like, nope, it's different this time. There's people moving from California. We had all these reasons why it was different in 2008 than it was in the 92 and 84, whatever the other years were. And so we said, no, it's different. And as it was going up, we just didn't see what was coming. And what I realized is that there's very, very important during that time, if I look back, to watch what are the prices, what is the underlying price of land, what is the price of housing, what is the cost of living. All those things mean something. If your cost of living is going up twice as fast as income, eventually they're gonna run out of money, and people can't afford to buy. And people, for a long time it was less expensive to buy. Then your monthly payment was less if you buy than if you rent. Well, right now in Phoenix, it's you can rent a house a lot cheaper than you can buy it, especially in the North Valley. So those are signs that I think that we're heading towards a peak. But the things during that time, the biggest thing is to look at and listen to all sides of the argument, if you will, or the economists. That there's economists that say this time I hear that again right now. Oh, this time is different. We're having manufacturing moving here. We don't have a subprime market. People aren't so over leveraged. But if the interest rates continue to go up, when people are buying properties, they go to sell it. If you have a $100,000 property that you bought with a 2.5% mortgage, and you're selling it at a 6.5%, you're not going to get the same price. No matter what the demand is, it comes down to what is my monthly payment. People are buying houses on monthly payments, and when the interest rate dropped down under 3% for homeowners, it completely pushed the pricing up. So the real value that we've seen in the rising in real estate was not true value, it was the reduced cost of money. When the cost of money goes up, the cost of the goods that it's financing is going to go down regardless of the demand. And since last October, I've been telling people, watch the interest rates. That will drive the market. It will not be only demand. That's part of it, but the other part is the cost of money. Because you're not going to buy a $500,000 house at 6%. You won't qualify for that loan. If you qualified at 3 and now it's 6, there's no way you're going to buy that same house. It's just not going to happen. Not enough Americans have that kind of. They're not saying, oh, I'm only doing 5% of my income in my mortgage. I'm going to do 10 now. No, most people are at 25, 30% of their income goes to their mortgage, and if the interest rates go up, their buying power has plummeted.
What is that? Is there a certain number, right, where you say 25% of their income or 30% of their income, or is there a certain rate? There's so much uncertainty with the Fed even raising rates, most likely again in a month or so. And is there a peak or a point where a crystal ball, right? Is there something like that?
No, there's no crystal ball. Sorry to disappoint you. I don't have one. It broke in 2009, 10, 11 when I crashed and burned. No, as far as the interest rate, the Fed interest rate is not direct. It is an indirect correlation to the mortgage rates, because the Fed rate is the overnight borrowing rate. And the last time the Fed raised 75 basis points, mortgage rates remained flat and the bond market dropped. So there's many metrics that drive. It's the bond market that drives most mortgages. Now, if you have lines of credit or other types of loans, they are driven by the Fed Reserve, but not all not like in commercial real estate. If I'm getting a Fannie or Freddie loan, it's on the bond market. So you're going to see, it depends on how recessionary we are. But right now, as far as the rate goes, I see the rate going up, and when we bump the rate up, it's going to affect the bank's ability to lend. However, what if you're not borrowing from a bank? You're borrowing from another mortgage company that doesn't get their money from other investment sources like the bond market. So we have to watch all those things that are backing the money that you're borrowing. But it does have a correlation that you will see, generally speaking, as the Fed raises rates, mortgage rates do go up over time. So we will see some more raising rates to fight inflation in real estate. Now, what percent is that? I feel like the right around 6% is a pretty safe number for our mortgages. When it gets down under 3%, I think you end up having this huge inflationary pricing going on, because people can leverage more and buy more property. But the problem with buying at 3% and now the mortgages are up over 5%, when you go to sell it, your buyers are now paying a higher interest rate. So that's part of the dynamic, that the increased mortgages will decrease the buying power. And now, what percentage of your income is for mortgages? In Arizona, it's typically been 18 to 25%. Some are 30%. You get up into San Francisco, it's a lot higher, but they do where people will buy a place, but they'll rent out rooms, so they'll cover their shortages that way. But I think in most major markets outside of California, New York, those two I don't have the number there, but for Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, you're about 3 times your rent is your income, your gross income. So if your income's $3,000 a month, you can afford $1,000 a month for living expense or for rent or mortgage.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, sounds like more of those cash flow heavy markets compared to the appreciation markets. Even Arizona is kind of turning into an appreciation market now, from what I've seen. So, what?
Yep. Yeah.
Where are you at, right? I believe you're still buying, and with all this knowledge that you have and these projections that you have, what is Bruce doing right now? What is he doing to prepare for something down the line?
Well, we're buying things that cash flow, and if they don't cash flow immediately, they need to cash flow, and within the first 12 months have a plan in place to cash flow. We're buying cash flow only, and what that did is it eliminated Phoenix from our purchases. It eliminated Tucson from our purchases because there's not the cash flow we need to maintain without bringing in a lot more money. And then the investors, we syndicate. Now, not all of our deals are syndicated. We're operators first, and we syndicate as needed. So if you're syndicating, you're raising capital, you also have to pay them a return. And if they're bringing the money in on a larger deal and it's 50% leveraged, you got to get a really good price so you can pay them a good return, because they're not going to come in for free, at least not for very long. So buying cash flows is really, really difficult, but that's what we're doing now. And then what are we doing to protect that? Within the first 12 months, stabilize the asset. Within 24 months, we'll be able to refinance, and we're underwriting 6-7% refinance loans. That's what we expect to refinance, and then the hope is that the rents are continuing to rise. We're not underwriting a huge increase in rents. We're doing the 3-4% typical, even though in some places like Dallas, Fort Worth is 14% year over year. We're not underwriting that, but if we get that, we'd like that, because that would help to cover the increased cost of debt. The other thing that we're doing is underwriting a little bit heavier on expenses, because expense ratios are going up. Expenses are going up. There's no question. Materials are higher. Labor's higher. Everything's going to catch up to inflation, so that we're going to have to pay more. So once we refinance, we're going for long-term loans, maybe even a HUD loan, which is a 35-year loan, no call. It's one we're looking at for our project in Albuquerque, that we get into a HUD loan to protect ourselves through a cycle. And then at that point, your goal is to keep it occupied and keep it cash flowing. And so that's the protection you have, is to get a longer loan. So if the market goes down, back up, it doesn't matter if you keep it 80-90% occupied. You should build a cash flow.
Now, I want to touch back on this 2008, just where you were, everything, like you said, you guys were young, hot and heavy, and thinking, well, we have 6-figure incomes now, and we're really moving, which is good. And then you have to start calling sellers and giving back the keys, which has to, just a gut feeling, right? And I haven't experienced that. I might, we all have learning lessons, but what is a big takeaway from where you were on top of the world, and then now you're in 2010, 2011, and you've changed your business plan, and you've changed how you thought. Can you talk about what those changes were from what it used to be?
Yeah, and you said giving keys. So just to be technical. It was vacant land, so we didn't give keys so much as paper. But I get what you mean. But we called the owners up, say, hey, we can't make the mortgage, we can't afford it. We're going to deed the property back to you, and you can have it and do what you want with it. And I haven't checked. I should check. I bet they all still own the property that this many years later, right? But the thing that we did is I went back to keeping it simple, went back to the basics of houses. And the biggest thing was I knew how to find houses. I knew how to find good deals. And so we went back and we watched those. When those prices were plummeting, there's people saying, hey, Bruce, that's risky, the prices. I said, these houses at the peak were worth $285,000, and now we're buying them for $35,000. How much lower can they go? I mean, if it goes lower than that, we have bigger problems. But even if it cut in half of 35 is 17.5. That's not very risky. And we were getting in and out really quick, and we were wholesaling. We were getting $5,800 was our average wholesale profit per deal. So it was just a machine. But the mindset was falling. And there's a book that I read called Catching Knives, and that applied so much to that market. Even when the market was falling, we were buying at 80, selling at 85, and then the market dropped to 70, we're selling at 75. The market dropped to 60, selling at 65. We just kept buying as the knives were falling, and then we were selling them to homeowners, and we were doing it on a seller carryback, and then we would sell our note on the market at face value to investors. So we set up these mortgages, create them, sell them, and it was many years later. I went back and I checked the records, just looked through, and over 50% of the owners still own their home 10 years later. In 2018 was the last time I checked. Or I guess it was probably 6-7 years later, but they still owned them. And now those properties are worth back to where they were back in 2007. So, but the biggest thing, so what did I realize is that it comes down to, number one is the basics. Do what you know how to do, and then add to it as you learn. Don't go into a whole new thing. So now when we're working in multifamily, I am hyper focused on CC minus neighborhoods, the lower middle class, upper lower class, properties built primarily the 60s to 80s, very specific. And a lot of people don't like those ones, but that's what I know. If we get something that somebody sends us an A-class new development, it looks appealing, it looks really sexy, really exciting. And I'm like, well, I don't know that, so I'm not going to do that. I work on Class C, C minus, lower middle class, upper lower class, self-paying residents, non-subsidized, and hyper-focused on the workforce. So what I learned from that is that those permanent renters, people that rent in lower income will always be renters. And so those residents are the ones that we focus on, hyper-focus on, the same ones we did when I was doing houses. So it's the same demographic. The crime's a little bit higher than it would be in the nicer neighborhoods, but enough that it's manageable as owners.
One thing that you said that I can relate to is do what you know. And it sounded like you were so ingrained in the market and you had so much experience that if you saw, like you said, a property topped out at $285 and now it's $35,000, I mean, that's a deal. There is no way that, like you said, if it goes even below that, then there's a bigger problem, and we need to change the conversation. But when there was a property in Oklahoma City that we purchased where we were seeing things in the market selling for $80,000-$90,000 a door, and it's a B, C class neighborhood, but we got this property for $47,000, and you just know when you see a property that's discounted like that, you want to make sure that the foundation is all good and there's no big capex problems. But if there isn't, then that's a deal, and you need to pursue that and get that done, because like you said, once you know the market as well as you did, you just make a decision and you move on it. You take it.
Yeah, and I think we'll have opportunities. We've made the most money in a falling and down market, and it's been most difficult in the rising market. We see a lot of people that made a lot of money in the last 3 years, and many of them haven't experienced a downturn. And I hope that they have either mentors or somebody that is coaching them to brace themselves for when we do have a market shift. There's already people kind of panicking because the rates have gone up so high and their exit model is killed. And so how are they going to protect themselves? And I don't have all the answers, but and I don't and And I don't know, always want to be right either. I just want to be protected. That's a whole new thing that we're protecting ourselves. Where previously, it was all flowers and butterflies and children frolicking in the meadow, and that's what I thought it was. Well, then when the locusts came and ate all the food, all the grass, all of a sudden you got nothing but bare dirt. That's kind of the situation that I went through. Was everything was wonderful. All of a sudden the locusts came, wiped everything out, and I was still in this field, and I had to replant and rebuild and replenish this field called life. And so it was a very challenging time, but yet a lot of good lessons out of it. I don't want to learn them again. I learned enough.
Right.
I want to focus on growth.
Absolutely. And that's great. Now, I know you also have had a lot of exposure and learning, and we're taking this down a little bit different direction, but whenever you're growing a brand, and I think you've done that, you mentioned earlier that you've been on over 50 different shows and podcasts and radio shows, and what's the strategy for that? I hear a lot of people talk about you want to build a brand, and that relates to credibility, but you're at a different level than I am, and how has that really affected your business whenever it comes to building your brand?
Well, it kind of started out as just kind of fun when I first started going out on these guest podcasts. People were setting up new podcasts. They wanted guests. So there's some people I was their, I was his 57th guest, and then I was also his 1187th guest. So I've been on podcasts that people they've had hundreds and hundreds of guests I've been multiple times on. But what happened then, I've been told by multiple people, you should really do a podcast. You have the energy, the ambition, the history, and you could really, and I'm not interested. I'm interested in brick and mortar. As one of my mentors from years ago says, brick and mortar. He's from New York. But yeah, so I'm interested in the property level. I like to walk the property. I like to hear the sounds. I like to see the sights. I like to smell what's going on there. I like to feel the energy, what's going on in the neighborhood. We drive neighborhoods, go around. If I could do that all day, every day, it'd be so exciting for me to fly into an area, drive the neighborhood, get to know the community, eat their food, drink in their coffee shops, get to know what they're doing, go to the local barbecue if you're in Texas, and just really experience what it's like in the neighborhood. And hosting a podcast wouldn't do that for me. I get why they're good, and I see why people love them. The second thing is it's a lot of work to be relevant for a long time. There's a lot of podcasts that come and go, and there's some that have really withstood the test of time. And it's an ongoing thing. It's a commitment, and it's, for a lot of people, it's in addition to their core business. And I just didn't want that distraction. I thought my energy was better served being a guest on other podcasts. So I turned a little game. How many podcasts can I be on? And in just a couple of years, it's been over 50 podcast recordings. And I think I'm getting some similar results from these. And then one of the guys from our office says, hey, I want you to listen to all my podcasts I've done, go through them and find the golden thread. Like what is consistent in all the messaging? And he went back, he said, you've been doing this for so long, and yet all your messages are consistent. You talk about the same things, you have the same passion, focus on the resident. And then the shift has been from buy, fix, and sell now to buy, fix, and hold, and create the more legacy, family, multi-generational income is really what I'm focusing on now. And I'm hoping through these podcasts, I can if not, first and foremost, share some nuggets so the listeners have something to walk away from. But if somebody's seeking an investor, hopefully I can resonate with somebody and they can reach out to me and say, hey, I like what you said. I'd like to learn more. And so I've got a number of people that have joined our network through the podcast. It's actually been remarkable.
Yeah, I think that's great that you need to see what your goal is, right? You said brick and mortar. Stick with what you're good at, and especially see where you want to take your business. Because like you said, you see so many podcasts that start up and maybe they're at episode 50, and I don't see a podcast for another 6 months. And it is another arm of your business. And if you are going to get into that commitment, you need to actually commit. Right. And I think that's great that you can see where you want to take your business. And I don't want that. right? You know, you said, I don't want to start a podcast. I'm okay with still getting the exposure from other people's podcasts, but it's just not for me. And I think so many people get caught up in the hype, but you don't weigh out the pros and cons and really what the commitment is before taking that next step.
Yeah, what's really interesting, because I've gotten a lot of exposure recently, and I'm typically an under the radar kind of guy. I like to be unknown. Like when I go to the auction, nobody knew who I was physically. They knew my name, but I wasn't out there anywhere. So it's kind of fun to walk around, listen to them talking when they're at the auction down at the courthouse, and at that, at one point we were probably the biggest buyer at the courthouse, and nobody knew who I was, and it was kind of cool just to walk around, listen to them, hear my bidder bid for me, and knowing that was my bids he was putting out there on these properties, and it was actually quite fun to have that. So I like that. I like to be a little probably less known. I'm not big on self promotion. So this whole being part of a podcast movement and being on people's podcasts is a new journey for me, because it does require some self promotion, and I'm not real comfortable in self promotion. I'm more excited about promoting a product or talking about a property, and people notice the energy level goes up when I start talking about the property and the residents and what we're doing. Talk about the financials or the marketing, and all of a sudden I start, something else.
It's good to know yourself, absolutely. And Bruce, I think we'll start closing this out. I really appreciated your time and learning, and again, someone with so much experience like yourself, it's really eye-opening to just hear your story and where you see the market going. So I really appreciate your time. I want to ask you.
Yeah, thanks. It's been awesome.
I want to ask you 3 quick questions. One being, if you could recommend a book to our listeners, what would that be?
Relentless. Tim S. Grover is the author.
Okay, Relentless. I have an idea about what that's about, but what does that go into?
Relentless. Tim Grover was Michael Jordan's personal coach. He trained him physically and how to become a better Michael Jordan, and through his career he was able to redefine and retrain muscles so that he could do things better than anybody else around him. And so his ability to isolate those muscles to work for a long term. So he was playing chess and not checkers, meaning he was training Michael for the long term, not for the short term gain to get this victory today, but how can we get more victories than anybody else? How can we get more championships? That whole mindset of how can he turn into a human champion was really fascinating. So I read the book 3 times, listened to the audiobook twice, and it is to date my favorite.
Wow. I haven't heard of that, but I definitely know Michael Jordan and really can appreciate the chess part of it. You want to place your pawns in a certain spot so that you can position your other players, and there's just so much thinking that has to go behind that. So that sounds like a great recommendation. I'll have to check that out myself. If people want to learn more about you, where's the best way for them to do that?
Very simply, bakerson.com. That's BAKERSON.com. Because remember, I'm an SOB, a son of a baker. And then in there, you can scroll down the page. You can schedule and get right on my calendar, right through our website. So go to bakerson.com, get on my calendar, and the best way to reach me.
Great. And if you can give our listeners one more piece of advice to take away from this conversation, and what would that be?
Number one piece of advice is listen to those that have gone before, meaning those that have experience. My mentor has 53 years experience in multifamily investing. That's how old I am. So I think I should listen. When he says this is what to watch for, I think it's time to listen. He's got a lot of experience, so do always listen to those that have gone before and paved the roads that allowed us to do what we do. Those are the people that know.
That's great. That's really good. Well, Bruce, again, really appreciate your time today, and I got a ton of information from this, so thanks again.
Hey, Caleb, thanks a ton for having me on. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. It really means a lot.
Yeah. So, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.